Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, when I first started this program nearly, almost 11 years ago, which is hard to believe, I remember the days of being a little bit, I don't want to say nervous, but just uncertain that, we wouldn't have enough to talk about on this program each and every day. That, of course, is not anywhere near reality today, as typically what I have to do is decide what we don't have time to talk about, which, by the way, is why I recommend signing up for our free Inner Circle email that you get each and every day, because we get to things that we don't have time to get to here. You can join that list totally free, texting TRUTH to 317-785-1030. But today, on today's program, what I want to do is talk about some loose ends with Iran, because there have been other developments. And I want to talk a little bit about this AI image that Trump posted. My wife texted me this. I think all she said was why. And we'll talk about that here in due course later in the program. But I do want to tie up, again, I don't want to call them necessarily loose ends, but there's a lot happening with Iran. And I think that this needs to be discussed, and we need to stay on top of it, because if you're watching the mainstream media, if you're listening to leftists, if you're listening to Democrats, heck, if you're listening to a lot of Republicans, I shared with you the other day some names of some prominent conservatives who misread Trump's Truth Social post, acting like that's the most egregious thing that can happen, when in reality, the worst possible scenario that we could find ourselves in with Iran is an Iran with a nuclear weapon. I don't care. By and large, I think it's a fair statement. I said a version of this yesterday. There is nothing that Trump can say that is worse or more offensive or more dangerous than Iran having the nuclear weapon. And I think for those who don't conclude that, I think they misunderstand just how dangerous and how radical the mullahs, ayatollahs are running Iran. So that's the direction we're headed here today. Let's face it, friends, living with discomfort is tough. And while the prescription medication route can help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. This is a family-run company. They do things the right way. They're not selling synthetic garbage. They work directly with Indonesian farmers. They lab test their batches that they bring to market here in the U.S. There's no chemicals. There's no surprises. There's no synthetics. It's just natural kratom that's been used for generations. So, do your own research, though. That's necessary, and that's what Christopher's Organic Botanicals wants. They want you to do your research, and once you decide, if you decide that you would like to give this a try, the best place to start is with their Kratom Starter Pack. Makes sense, right? Just text the word, don't text the word. Visit Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com, and use code Todd Huff. That's my first and last name. That's different than most of our coupon codes, so keep that in mind. Code Todd Huff's going to save you 10%. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Okay, let's summarize where we are in this situation with Iran. So let me find this here. I had some notes I wanted to start with. Here we go. Okay. So the United States, according to reporting, has given or had given Iran 6 red lines. This is being reported in, where is it? Newsmax.com. I'm sure you can find it elsewhere as well. Here are those 6 red lines to Iran. Number 1, absolutely no movement, 0 movement towards weapons-grade uranium. That's, by the way, 90% enrichment levels. This is, if they're enriching uranium to that level, they are not trying to use it for power, for electricity, for energy in their country. And of course, this is what happens. It's just, we know exactly what they're doing, right? They come out, and if you follow this closely, a lot of people don't even know what's going on. The details here, we've gone through them here. Excuse me. We've gone through those here. And basically, Iran, who's had an ambition for a nuclear weapon, has decided that they are going to have that weapon no matter what. And they know, I mean, it's outlandish to think that this regime, who has been nothing but oppressive and abusive towards their own population. Of course, we have reports that they've killed tens of thousands, maybe even 45,000 people here in the past few months who have risen up to oppose the current regime in the Islamic Republic of Iran. These are not nice people. They do not believe in what we have here in this country. They believe that they have a mandate given to them by Allah, and that they are to enforce their religion in the country. That's the starting point. But also, dare I say, they want to have at least a regional caliphate, which basically means that they want the region, the Middle East, to be under strict Islamic rule, and the leader, the political leader, to be someone who, of course, is a religious political leader. And so in order to have a caliphate, what you need is a nation that is forcibly Islamic. And if you as an individual decide that you don't want to be Muslim, you disagree with the faith, you're a Christian, you're an atheist, you're a Jew, you're whatever, secular humanist, and you say, I'm not a Muslim, they say, well, that's too bad because you either pay a very oppressive higher taxes, and ultimately that's just the starting point. It's a game of forced compliance. You become ultimately a Muslim or you die. That's where this leads us, my friends. You talk about Islamofascism. This is exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. And we're supposed to believe that these same clowns who treat people like that care enough about them to make sure that they have affordable energy to power their homes and so forth, and to deliver electricity in the countryside. And we're supposed to believe that the only way that they can do that is through atomic energy, which, of course, you try to do that here in the United States, good luck. But that's the starting point for all the shenanigans and the charades. And we know what they're doing. There's not a single soul on this planet who doesn't understand, at least in a position of leadership in a country, people who are involved in solving this problem. Everybody knows that this is a charade, that Iran is using the civilian nuclear program as a way to jumpstart their nuclear weapons ambitions. That's what they're doing. There's no debate over this. This is clearly what they're doing. And so a nuclear Iran is the most dangerous outcome we could possibly have. They've threatened to, of course, wipe Israel off the face of the planet. It would give them the capability, notwithstanding the divine protection of Almighty God himself, of the people in Israel. That is another discussion that I won't get into now. But outside of that, Iran would have the means to actually bring into reality what from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They have the ability, they would have the ability, at least in theory, if they had a nuclear weapon, to make that a reality. So the U.S. says it's a red line, and it should be a red line. This cannot be accepted under any circumstances. A nuclear Iran. They are dangerous. They are radical. They are extreme. They don't believe in liberty. They will use it to at least terrorize the Middle East and maybe the rest of the world. And it's conceivable that they would use it to obliterate their religious and political enemies. So that's the first of the 6 red lines. Zero movement. Absolutely no movement towards weapons-grade uranium, number 1. Number 2, strict IAEA inspections, and there are to be no restricted sites. Now, the IAEA is the International Atomic Energy, Association, Administration, I don't know. But their job is to effectively go in and monitor where Iran is enriching uranium to make sure that they are using it for, of course, the stated civilian energy purposes and not for weapons-grade uranium. That's what they're supposed to do. So the United States says it's a red line to say that they cannot that they are not permitted to inspect anywhere. They have free reign, Iran, to go in and do this, right? This is the deal. This is a red line. The third one is that there would be no expansion of centrifuge capability beyond civilian need. So in other words, again, we talked about having weapons-grade uranium. In order to have weapons-grade uranium, you need a different type, a more, potent, or I don't know the word, but a centrifuge that's capable of producing more highly enriched uranium, which would be weapons-grade. And so there's literally no reason for Iran to have this capacity. Because again, they're madmen who want the world to be subjected to their interpretation of Islam, or else you be killed, you be forced into it, whatever. That's what they believe that they have a divine mandate to do here on planet Earth. The fourth red line that the United States said out of the 6 red lines that they had in the negotiations with Iran is that there would be no development of nuclear-capable delivery systems tied to the program. This is where their ballistic missile capabilities come into play, because just because you have nuclear, step 1, you have nuclear energy. Step 2, you are able to refine or enrich that uranium to a higher grade, making it weapons grade, not simply energy consumption for the Iranian people. Wink, wink. Step 2 is to be able to get weapons grade. And step 3 is to be able to have a mechanism by which you can deliver that weapon and hit your targets. And so you don't have to necessarily, again, I don't want to get into the physics of this, but there are weapons called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And when you fire, this is why the space, one of the reasons why the race to space was so important in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, all the space exploration. Even today, some of this stuff is still relevant when it comes to military dominance now in space. But originally, when you had weapons, missiles, that would be fired from, say, the Soviet Union and hit the United States, in most instances, not from, say, Eastern Russia to Alaska, you wouldn't necessarily have to have an ICBM for that. But if you were to fire a missile from one of the other locations in say, Western Russia, say St. Petersburg, Moscow, in that side of the country, your missile had to leave the atmosphere, go into at least low space, and make a trajectory around the globe, and then re-enter the atmosphere over the target. And so that's fairly sophisticated, right? I mean, that's not something you can just put together in the backyard on a weekend. That's something that is sophisticated. Now, there's other levels of ballistic missiles as well that would, say, allow Iran to strike Israel, for example. And if you get a nuclear warhead, if you get the missile high enough and it's coming down over target, even if you shoot that missile, I mean, this can cause a massive problem when it comes to an EMP attack. And so there's a lot of bad things that can happen from this. And so they cannot be allowed to develop missiles systems that would deliver these nuclear warheads any further. Well, ideally not at all, but certainly not to be able to strike targets that are far away. So no development of nuclear capable delivery systems for their nuclear program. The fifth red line the United States gave the Islamic Republic of Iran is a full accounting of all past nuclear activity. This one, listen, it's certainly something that should be required. But the idea that these folks are going to be forthcoming and transparent and candid with the United States, with negotiators and so forth, to me is pie in the sky thinking. We're never going to know what they've been doing to the full extent anyway. This is one big game to them. Delay, push the envelope, make the enemy, in this case us, hesitant to strike too hard because then it would be disproportionate. Sometimes they have us thinking we shouldn't strike at all. It's all that stuff, right? Putting us in the seat of having all this pressure, us in Israel, of course. And they're just the madmen that are trying to buy time so that they can develop a weapon. And that's unacceptable. And the sixth red line the U.S. gave to to Iran, is that there are automatic consequences if Iran violates the terms, not more open-ended diplomacy. This is good too. So it's a very sound series of red lines because of who we're dealing with, the threat that having that weapon would immediately create in the region. But typically what happens to I guess complete the thought on the sixth and final red line here is that Iran again plays this. They're kind of masters at this, if I'm being honest, because they know how to manipulate and work the system that has been put together by people who absolutely will do anything to avoid war. Listen, I don't want to go to war. I think it should be avoided not at all costs, but as much as reasonably possible. But if your enemy has decided that he wants to attack you, take you out, and is in pursuit of a weapon that would give him the ability to do that, or at least give him the ability to become a international nightmare on the world stage here, you cannot allow that to happen. You absolutely cannot allow that to happen. And so Iran knows how to work us. They do. They know how to work the media. That's what's sad about this whole thing to me. You know, a lot of times, I think back to even Vietnam, you know, there were, what was happening on the ground was sometimes of secondary importance because the messaging undermine the war effort. And I'm not here to defend Vietnam. I'm just telling you what happened, because the messaging, the marketing, the news coverage, the way it was being presented and branded, and again, not defending it, I'm just simply saying whenever you have a narrative that's undermining the actual mission, which again, the media is all too excited and all too prepared to go ahead and do this exact sort of thing when it comes to misrepresenting what's going on in the Iran-U.S. conflict here. And so this is a dangerous scenario that we found ourselves in. So this Iran has come out and proposed a 5-year suspension. They said, look, here's what we'll do. We'll suspend our nuclear program for 5 years. We're not going to dismantle our centrifuges, our infrastructure. After all, why would we do it? Because we're only going to pause it for 5 years. You can trust us here. We're going to do this. We're men of our word, right? And so this, of course, gives them the capacity, the capability to immediately restart their program in 5 years, even if they didn't do anything for 5 years, which I think is, beyond naive to think that at this point. They would have the ability to pause now, or at least give the impression that they're pausing now and basically restarting exactly where they are in 5 years, if they're not doing anything in secret between now and then. But this is how they negotiate. This is what happens. They delay, and they still maintain their leverage in these negotiations. And this ends up creating pressure because of the narrative that we mentioned, because of the way that this is presented, because of this idea that peace, meaning the absence of war here, needs to be pursued at all costs, which again, it needs to be pursued in every conceivable way, but you cannot, if your enemy has decided that there's going to be a war, the only decision that you then have to make is who is going to bear the cost of that war. If they've decided they're gonna launch it, then we have to then decide where the cost of that is going to be, who's going to carry that cost. And it should be Iran, not the United States. So I've got to take a break here, my friends, as I glance down at the clock. I'll talk about this and tie this up in the next segment. And then we'll also, as I promised, talk a little bit about Trump and his AI-generated image of him apparently being compared or connected to Jesus. We'll talk about it after the break. Sit tight. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Just want to tie up this situation with Iran, and we'll do that this segment. We'll get into talks here. Talks about, this Trump's AI image that he posted on Truth Social. Looking here for a piece of paper there we go. I got a piece of paper I wanted to share, wanted to have handy here as we get into this. So that's where we're headed, my friends, throughout the program. But I want to tie up Iran here really quickly as well. But ever notice how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That is not by accident. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies, things like private equity, private credit, option strategies, coupled with expert legal guidance. It's about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today and tomorrow. If you're looking to do more than just manage your money, if you want to leave your mark, if you want to build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. Okay, so I mentioned here Iran's counter proposal, wanting to suspend their nuclear program for 5 years. Wink, wink. We've been down this road before. The United States apparently said it needs to be at least a 20-year delay on this. But again, a nuclear Iran is completely unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And it creates pressures, and I was starting to say this before the break that I had to take last segment. But Iran's negotiating position and the way that this is reported and talked about in the international community and so forth, it puts a ton of pressure on the United States just to accept any sort of negotiation just to put an end to the war. But I will tell you that I don't think Trump is going to fall into that trap. I don't think Trump is going to negotiate an end to this just to negotiate an end to this. This is the sort of thing that politicians often do. This is why President Biden ended up abandoning nearly, 15,000 Americans in Afghanistan. He was so committed to the headline, to the narrative, to the list of quote-unquote accomplishments that he could put on a resume should he, of course, he didn't run again in 2024, but had he run again in 2024, he wanted to tell the American people, I put an end to the longest running war in American history, the war in Afghanistan. Bush started it. Obama continued it. Trump couldn't stop it, but I could. That was what he wanted the narrative to be. And they were prepared. It didn't matter the damage that was done because they wanted that narrative. They wanted the headline. The same exact thing that happened in Benghazi. They didn't, the Obama administration did not want to admit or acknowledge that there were terror groups around the world who were still powerful enough to create problems in other countries and even for the United States of America. And they wouldn't, they didn't want to draw attention to it. They wanted to come up with some narrative, some story to prevent people from really knowing what happened. And they didn't care. They didn't care about the people that lost their lives at Benghazi. And that's how these politicians are so many times. And they want to say, look, we kept Iran from getting a nuke. We sign a piece of paper. We have a handshake. Everybody has a pinky promise. And suddenly we're supposed to believe that everything is hunky-dory apple pie. But in reality, we know what Iran is doing. They are working the system. They are not going, I'm telling you, Trump is not going to let them slip through the cracks. Iran is notorious for being like Jell-O. It's like nailing Jell-O to the wall. If you've ever heard that analogy, that's what Iran is like. It's as though you can't really ever get them pinned down to a certain set of realities or outcomes or circumstances. They just continue to slither and writhe and contort themselves to avoid ever really being forced to make a decision to abandon the program completely or face absolute destruction or whatever. They continue to just maneuver. But Trump is in the process of backing them into the corner. And I think that's going to end up happening. I think Trump is well aware of what he's dealing with here. The people surrounding Trump know what they're up against. If this gets out, forget about if it gets out of Trump's term. I think Trump is going to deal with this the best way he possibly can. The real question becomes, what happens after this? What happens in the next administration? If it's someone like J.D. Vance, the chances are better that it's dealt with directly than if it's someone like, it won't be Eric Swalwell now apparently, but someone from the left is not going to hold these folks accountable. This is a mess, and it's dangerous. That's the thing. It's very, very dangerous here. So the United States has reported, blockade, where they're effectively trying to prevent certain ships from entering or exiting Iranian ports. So there's some gray area as to what exactly is happening here. But this is another way to turn up the pressure here, as this is, again, think about this as Trump's way to make sure that the Iranians are not going to continue playing games. And so they will continue to play them. But when we see, it's almost like this. If you ever coach sports, right? You teach your team, if you're a basketball coach, if you see a 1-3-1 half-court trap, we're going to do this. And if we do that well enough, and if we exploit the weaknesses of that defense, a lot of times it'll get the team to get out of it. If they go to a 2-3 zone, you say, okay, let's do this. This is how we address the 2-3 zone. And if you, again, find and exploit those vulnerabilities, it forces the opponent to get out of it. Iran is going to continue to try to change up its defenses, metaphorically here with the basketball analogy. And Trump, his job is to basically execute the plan to hold these folks accountable and to make them realize that that's not the solution either. And the whole point is to drive them into the corner, to get them to, for once and for all, which again, this is a long, long way from over. But this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with madmen who are absolutely evil, and they will do anything that they can to avoid being held accountable and prevented from having a nuclear weapon. So that's all I want to say about, I want to say more, but as I look at the clock and I tell you what else I'm going to get to, I'm not able. I have to stop. I have to stop and move on here. And where are we headed next? I told you at the top of the program, Trump had posted on Truth Social yesterday an AI-generated image. Now, you can see this if you are a subscriber to our Inner Circle, which is totally free. These emails go out once a day with links and backgrounds and just stories, additional things that we don't get to on this program. Goes out in the email. You can join that for free. Just text TRUTH to 317-785-1030. But many of you have probably seen it. Some of you may not have seen it. But it's a picture of Trump. Again, it's AI generated. And it's got the American flag. It's got some eagles. It's got some fighter jets. It's got military personnel. It's got someone wearing a veteran hat. It's got the Statue of Liberty. It's got a nurse. It's got a woman praying. It's got a bunch of stuff going on here in the background. And it's got Trump. And there's a sick individual, looks like someone who's sleeping, presumably someone who's in a hospital bed. I don't know. But Trump is leaning over and touching their forehead. Trump has a ball of light, I would say, in one of his hands. He's in a white robe, and he's also got like a colorful, I don't know what you would call it, but it's over the white robe, part of it, at least his shoulders. To be candid with you, when I first saw it, I thought, my initial thought, and I'll get to this more after the break, is that I'm looking at the clock here, but I thought he was kind of mocking the Pope a little bit. But a lot of people have said that that this image depicts him as Jesus, which I can see as well. That wasn't my first inclination. As I look at it now, I can certainly see that. But Trump has taken this down. We'll talk about it after the break. I got to take a time out, though, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Your investments, they're like seeds that you plant. They grow, they multiply. But my friends, are they bearing the kind of fruit that you want? At 4-8 Financial, they believe your money should reflect your values. They specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing. They screen out companies that do not align with your faith. That's all about their purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of meaning and purpose. You want to see if your investments align with your values? Just visit 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd 4-8 Financial. They're here to worry about your money so you don't have to. All right. So again, Trump posted this image, AI generated to social media. As I look at it now, and I asked Oz during the break, I mean, if when I first saw it, and again, I looked quickly, I thought Trump was basically going after the Pope. I thought when I saw this, I thought Trump has had a spat with the Pope. The Pope is basically out there saying, blessed are the peacemakers, and putting Trump on defense because Trump, of course, is starting a war with the Iranians. I think that there's a whole lot more of context that needs to be given to that. But nonetheless, I think Trump has had this bit of a spat with the Pope. Trump views the Pope as liberal in some or even many aspects, and this is just what Trump does. I think I told Oz this. I think, if you have close friends and you text some things that you wouldn't ever say publicly, but you're just joking or something, I think that's what Trump posts on Truth Social. I just think he just doesn't care. There's no, if it's something he's going to text to a close confidant, he'll just post it. Now, he took it down. This is rare for Trump to take it down. I think my take from this is that Trump, I don't think he meant for this to be interpreted that he was Jesus. I think, and I could be wrong, I think Trump, of course, these AI images can be any number of things, right? I mean, you tell it, you give it a prompt or whatever, and it creates something. I think that Trump basically said, look, we're over here doing things to help people too, or whatever. You're no better than me, Pope. Now, many of you might say, yes, he is. And I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying, I think that was Trump's intention from this. And I think when he starts hearing people say that he's comparing himself to Jesus, I don't want to say, I don't know what bothers Trump really. But that might have. There are people who talk about Trump and just some of his discussions about Christianity, and there's comments that he's made in the past that talking about forgiveness and how he didn't need it or something. So I don't remember the quotes exactly, but listen, I'm not a fan of this. I'm not. I would listen. I understand that there's a time to be dramatic, but when it comes to the God of the universe, his son Jesus, I don't really feel comfortable doing things in that realm that could be viewed as sacrilegious or just inappropriate. At the far extreme of that, you could say blasphemous. I don't think that's how Trump meant this. I don't. Now, there are some people who think that immediately, but again, they always do. So they're just, again, looking for a crime to fit the punishment that they've already decided that Trump should be serving, which is anything that takes him out of the White House. But still, I look at this and I think, well, yeah, this is certainly can be interpreted to saying that Trump thinks he's Jesus. I don't think he thinks that. Some of you might think that he does. I think that that's a misunderstanding. I think that it's more his braggadocious style and just his willingness to, or maybe his unwillingness to back down from anybody. I think that he meant this to say, who do you think you are, Pope? to challenge me. I'm not intimidated of you. And it missed the mark. And of course, then you got to answer questions like this. So again, like for me, obviously, if you listen to this program, I could never. That's not my personality style. But I do try to present it fairly, or how I interpret it. I think now that I look at it, I can see where, yeah, he's looking like he's dressed like an apostle, looking like he's dressed like Jesus, potentially dressed as the Pope. Trump made a comment saying he thought it was him as a doctor. I don't see that at all. Anyway, and so there's this spat, and of course, I don't have time to get into it. But the Pope, by the way, who I don't always agree with politically, the Pope can certainly, in fact, I would say he has an obligation to share his opinions of what's happening in the world through a biblical lens, his interpretation anyway. I think he has an obligation to the Catholic Church. I'm an evangelical, but I think that I and we as followers of Christ have an obligation to address issues from a biblical lens as well. But I'm just out of time. I can't get into this anymore. Gotta run. SDG.